Hi, Matt Scott here today talking about how water is used in trees, or kind of following the cycle of water in trees, going from rain or water that's being put into the root zone through till it's ultimately exiting the tree. So kind of that, talking about that cycle and how that goes down. So if we start out with water from rain or irrigation or just watering, however it enters the root zone of the tree, we have water that enters the root zone of the tree, and it's going to be absorbed by the roots. And that really happens with the fine absorbing roots, usually within the top foot or so of the soil. And the way it's absorbing is really, it just has a lower concentration of water inside of the roots than outside of the roots, at least once it's raining or there's water in that soil and in that root zone. So through osmosis, the water's moving from the soil into the roots at the base of the tree. And from there, what's really transporting the water throughout the rest of the tree is the xylem, or at least it happens in the xylem. And it's a plant tissue. It's composed of a couple of different cell types, but essentially it consists of long tubes, or the cells in it become long tubes. They're actually not living in most of the xylem, but it can run all the way from the roots to the leaves. And in hardwoods you might have vessels or conifers, tracheids, so there's a little bit of a difference there. But you can think of the xylem kind of like a bundle of straws, and kind of, to use that analogy, there's a force that's going to draw the water from the roots or where it's absorbed to where it's ultimately going in the plant, and kind of along that straw. And the force that drives that process in trees is transpiration, and this happens when a certain amount of water is going to be evaporated from the leaves, and it's evaporated out of the stomata, so there are small holes on the surface of the leaves. That evaporative force is creating a pressure gradient. We're losing water out of the leaves through that evaporation, and it pulls water up from the roots. So it's kind of a way to think about it as it's pulling, because there's a force of cohesion with water where the water molecules are joined together, where they're kind of sticky together. It's called cohesion. And as you're losing water from evaporation, it's pulling the rest of the water up from the roots and through the xylem, so through our tube of straws. And in trees, it's like nearly 90% of the water that is absorbed by the roots ultimately gets evaporated through transpiration. And it's important because it creates movement, and the other things that are being the minerals or the other things that the roots are absorbing that need to get to the root surface or need to get to other parts of the trees are also carried along with that current. And the water itself is necessary for a lot of different functions within the tree. And the tree does have some amount of control over how much water it's losing. The stomata have two guard cells, one on either side of it, that can cause them to close or open. And as the stomata close, you get less evaporation. So the tree can conserve water that way, but the downside of it also slows down this process of bringing water up from the roots. So really, it's a short-term solution when there's not enough water in the tree. You see a lot when, if it's like the middle of a hot day, I would imagine that the stomata on most of the leaf surfaces are going to be closed. In fact, a lot of plants in general are almost kind of like nocturnal in that sense, that the stomata are going to be more open and in cooler, darker periods at night than they will in the middle of the day, when water loss will be too great. So there's kind of that cycle there. And if there's prolonged water loss, or water's not entering the system, the tree's going to enter drought conditions, and there's a whole separate set of responses that the tree will have for drought conditions, things like wilting and building up abscisic acid and a couple other things that it does to respond to drought. But that's kind of another topic. But to get back to the water, so the water is being absorbed by the roots. It's being moved through the xylem by transpiration. Most of it is being evaporated off of the leaf surface, but some of it is being used by the tree. The cells within a tree need water for cellular functions, for different enzyme activities. It needs it to maintain turgor pressure, so that's just kind of like the pressure that's inside a cell that that keeps it from being all dried and kind of raisiny, right? It keeps that internal cell pressure. Water is also needed for photosynthesis. So the basic kind of formula there is carbon dioxide and water combining the chloroplasts with light from the sun, and that's creating that glucose that the plant needs and the cells need to perform normal cellular functions. Through that, oxygen is also released through the stomata. That's kind of a byproduct of the photosynthesis, so those stomata are important for that too. But that's kind of the end result of water in the trees. So from being absorbed by the roots, most of it being evaporated, but some of it being used for those essential functions in the tree as well.